Hi folks, I'm Dan Payne, and this is Web Accessibility for Business Owners. In this video, we'll briefly cover some of the regulations on web accessibility and a little bit of history. So let's get started. Okay, to be clear, I am not a lawyer. Please consult with a lawyer, preferably one with disability rights experience, like the great Lainey Feingold, for legal advice. Check out her website at lflegal.com. She has a lot of great information in her blog. So at the heart of everything accessibility, there's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which I refer to by their acronym WCAG. I say these guidelines are at the heart of accessibility because they're really the only set of comprehensive principles in the world that everyone uses as the international standard for making web content accessible. WCAG version 2.1 is a list of 78 success criteria, all organized under a general concept that website content needs to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. The first three are pretty self-explanatory: perceivable, operable, understandable. But that last one, robust, really just means that content should be accessible no matter what type of device you're using. Now, WCAG for me is what building code would be to a contractor. Using its success criteria to evaluate and find issues, and its techniques to fix those issues, WCAG is foundational in making a website accessible. Now, just like you wouldn't expect a contractor to only evaluate and fix issues after the job's done, it's the same for web development. The earlier in the process these guidelines can be learned and implemented, the easier, cheaper, and faster an accessible website can be produced. Now, what we call the internet has only existed since the early 90s. At first, your options were very limited for what you could do with a web page. But the underlying nature of its construction was semantic. That is, the language itself was something that could convey meaning about the structure of a page. For example, assistive technologies like screen readers already existed, and they could parse this information so blind users could understand the structure and content clearly. Over time, people grew impatient with the visual limitations of the language, so they started using elements, the building blocks of a page, in ways that they weren't intended to be used. There were standards, but it really was the Wild West, and people did all sorts of silly things. Websites became more elaborate and engaging, but the people building them became less aware of the harm that they were doing, and that slide continues to this day. The international organization that formed in the early 90s to create and maintain the web standards realized by the late 90s that they needed to create an initiative to address accessibility specifically. Among the many things these folks did was to draft the first international guidelines on web accessibility, which is WCAG. So like I said, WCAG is a set of guidelines. They're not laws, they're not rules, they're more like suggestions. They spell out things you should consider when building a site. They're not meant to be directive or absolute. That's where regulation comes in. As I said, WCAG is maintained by an international standards body. It's up to each government to determine if and how they choose to implement accessibility regulations. Governments around the world have created their own standards, most of which basically just say, whatever WCAG says, that's our standard. In the United States, we're still trying to figure it out. There's the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was signed just 1 year after the World Wide Web was born. Title III of the ADA basically says that if your business accommodates the public, you must comply with non-discrimination requirements. Now, as I understand it, that means the requirements are whatever the Department of Justice says the requirements are. For a number of years, the DOJ was working on a set of regulations that would help clarify this, but in 2017 that effort was abandoned. There's hope that under the new administration it'll be taken up again, but we'll see what happens. Although they declined to specifically require WCAG compliance, the DOJ did reaffirm that ADA Title III does apply to websites though. In the meantime, all business owners have to go on are a series of court decisions that are slowly establishing precedent. And so enforcement is left to civil courts. As you'd expect, Judges want to hear from subject matter experts when they consider their rulings. And of course, those experts are going to say that WCAG is the gold standard. So what's becoming clear is that the best way to avoid facing litigation is to simply comply with the guidelines of WCAG. Now again, I'm not a lawyer, but you'd think that demonstrating a good faith effort to address accessibility would help avoid complaints. It kind of makes sense. There are other considerations in the United States beyond just the ADA. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act is a procurement regulation. It requires all the stuff that the US government buys and uses be accessible for people with disabilities. Again, this is kind of vague because it doesn't define what be accessible means exactly. So again, it's left to lawyers and judges to figure it out. Still, it effectively means that if you want to do business with the government or any vendor that produces things for the government, your products, services, and operations need to be accessible. And we've generally seen that being accessible means WCAG compliant. Disabilities are covered in the Telecommunications Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Air Carrier Access Act, the Voting Accessibility for the Elderly and Handicapped Act, and on and on. What I tell folks is to basically not worry about it all. Focus on getting to, maintaining, and even exceeding WCAG compliance, and you'll probably be fine. So in conclusion, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, spell out the minimum requirements for web accessibility. Worldwide, many governments use WCAG as the basis for their regulations. While the US government doesn't explicitly require WCAG, it effectively does in a sort of kind of roundabout way. Now, just like you wouldn't hire a contractor to build your home if they are not up to date on local building code, make sure that the folks building and maintaining your website are up to date on WCAG criteria. Accessibility specialists, like myself, can help guide you to the resources that you need. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and what I've covered here just barely scratches the surface, and may already be out of date by the time you see this. Find and consult with a lawyer to get the best information specific to your situation. Okay, so in my next video, we'll examine the different types of disabilities that people have and discuss how they impact their use of the web. Thanks for watching. Cheers.